Welcome back, Year 7s. Today I'm going to go through exercise 13.3 and 13.4 from the Year 8 textbook. So the last video was about exercise 10.4 from the Year 7 textbook, right? So this video is now looking at that same concept that you guys learned, but harder questions at a Year 8 level. So that's what both 13.3 and 13.4 are about. So there won't be anything new out of the ordinary. It's just going to be the questions are just going to be slightly a bit harder. So I'm just going to go through a couple of examples from each chapter, so each exercise, and then you guys can attempt some yourself. And any questions you find difficult or hard, make sure you let me know in the next Zoom sesh, so I can go through it with you guys. Um, Also, a good idea is as I'm doing any kind of YouTube video, whatever it is, you need to be writing down some kind of notes. Where it is, I don't mind. If it's in your OneNote, if it's in your book, that's totally fine. But as I'm talking, you need to be writing some notes. And a good idea is something that Aaron does. Thanks, Aaron, for letting me know. What he does is he attempts the question before I even do it in the video, which is a really good way of practicing. So you can pause the video as I do a question, attempt it yourself, and then as I'm going through the video, you can check your answers, and that's a really good way of learning. So I would encourage you guys all to do that. Okay, so this is the Year 8 from the Year 8 book, exercise 13.3. It's called experimental probability. Again, it's very similar to what we learned in the other video. So as a fraction, the relative frequency of an event occurring is experimental probability of it occurring. So again, it's the same thing. It's like, what are the chances of this particular event happening? And last time the example I used was me shooting the ball in the hoop, and you write it as a fraction. So again, that's what this is all about. It's just about looking at the data that's given and writing a fraction or displaying the data to show us, okay, what is the chance of this and this happening. What I might do is, because it's really hard for me to write and have my video on, I'm going to switch my video off and I'm going to do the questions, just so I can write a bit neater as well. So hopefully you guys have your books or papers in front of you to follow along. I don't think I can actually turn my video off, so you might have to just look at my ceiling for now while I do these questions. I do apologize. Or just my forehead, it seems. Okay, so this question says the table at below shows the result of a fair coin that was tossed 20 times. What are the relative frequency of? So this is the table that they've given. So the event of getting ahead, so this person obviously tossed the coin 20 times. They got head 8 times and tails 12 times. So it's asking what are the relative frequencies of. So the first one is asking heads. So the way you would write it is, because asking relative frequency, you can just write relative frequency of a head is, again, you just write a fraction. So they got 8 heads out of the 20. And remember what I said, you need to simplify as much as you can. So 8 out of 20, I'm going to keep simplifying. Don't get confused between prime and composite numbers. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about how can you divide both these numbers until you can't divide them anymore. So I know I can divide these by 4. So I can say 2 over 5. That's it. So just a fraction. It's pretty easy. And B, relative. Sorry, I'm just going to write this way. Tail. So that's 12 out of 20, which can be simplified 3 out of 5. That's it. So all you're doing is literally just writing a fraction of how many you get or what you've obtained. So hopefully that's simple enough. This one slightly harder, the next question. I know it seems like a lot of information, so let's read through it slowly first. Okay, 40 people picked at random were asked where they were born. The results were coded as follows. So place of birth were Sydney, elsewhere New South Wales, interstate and overseas. So these were the responses given here. So what that means is if you were born in Sydney, you will write the number 1. If you're born anywhere else in New South Wales, you write 2. So for example, one person wrote, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There are 14 people that put the number 1, which means they were born in Sydney. So with these questions, you'll be given data in different ways, and it's learning on how to organize this data to to find out certain results and frequencies and things like that. So the first part of the question is organize a data into a frequency table. What a frequency table is, you write Sydney and you write how many people were born in Sydney. Elsewhere in New South Wales, how many? So this is already done for you here. What it's done is hopefully you guys have learned how to do a tally. So code 1 was obviously Sydney. There were 14 people, so they just did a tally, and that is a frequency. So frequency means how many there were. Code 2 was elsewhere, 9, 3, 4. So in a total, there were 40 people that were asked this question, right? And this was the data that they obtained. Let's have a look at part B. And when you get questions like this, see how the data looks quite messy. So it's really easy to do a tally to make the data much clearer. By looking at this table, it's very easy to read compared to this. It's a bit messy. So that's why learn how to put it into frequency tables. It says find the relative frequency of each category as a fraction and a decimal. Okay, so what I've done here is I've written each one as a fraction. So code 1 was 14 out of 40 people because that's a total of 40. Code 2, 9 out of 40. Code 3, 10 out of 40. And code 4, 7 out of 40. So yes, I've written it as a fraction, but now I need to simplify as much as I can. And then it also asks you to put it in decimals. So I'm going to show you that as well. So if I were to simplify this will be 7 out of 20. This one I can't simplify any further, so I'm just going to leave it like that. 1 over 4, and this is 7 out of 40. With converting into decimals, I want you guys to use a calculator. That is totally fine. So you just do 7 out of 20. And okay, so that's the decimals and fractions for each of that. So all we did was put that number over that for each section, and then I just put it in the calculator and found out the decimals of each one. All right, so let's look at part C. It says, what is a total of the relative frequency? So what that means is we've figured out the relative frequency. So we've got it in fractions here, we've got it in decimals. They're both the same thing, it's just written in different formats. So they're asking you what is the total. So total means you add them up. So if you were to add these up, you put it into your calculator, you should get 1 as a whole, just 1. Even if you were to add the decimals up, try and put in the calculator. That should also equal 1 as well. If it doesn't equal 1, then you need to double check your answers, like your fractions here, you would have had a mistake. So every time you add all these frequencies together, when it's a fraction or decimal, it should equal to 1. Alright, so part D. Where is the person selected at random most likely to have been born? So out of all this data, which one, if you were to select one at random, where are they most likely to be born? So even if we look at the fraction, it's a fraction where it has the highest frequency. So obviously it's going to be 14 is the highest one, which is code 1. And if we go back to the question, code 1 was Sydney. So code 1 is Sydney. So the persons, the most, if you select a person at random, they are most likely to be born in Sydney. And that is evident from the data that we've obtained. Okay, and last one, how many people out of 100 would you expect to be born overseas? Okay, so if we go back to our data, if we go back to this, overseas was number 4. So go back to this code 4. This was overseas, which was 7. So 7 out of 40, this one here. So we know out of this, 7 out of 40 people were born overseas. But the question is asking, how many people out of 100 would you expect? So if we're trying to predict this, so with 100 people, how many overseas, right? That's what we're trying to figure out. We know from our data that it was 7 out of 40. So in order to work this out, you set it up as, this is the formula that you use. I'll just write it. So when you get a question like this, when they've given you, how many do you predict will be born overseas with 100 people? This is a formula used. So the expected number, that's what we're trying to find. You get the relative frequency, which is this stuff here. So part A, this is all relative frequency. Then you multiply it by the number of people. So in this scenario, the relative frequency was 7 out of 40, and the number of people is 100. So again, you can simplify yourself, you can use a calculator, I don't mind, but this comes to 17.5. Obviously, you can't have 17.5 people, you can't have half a person. So we're going to round it up to roughly 18 people. So that means out of 100 people, 18 of those are expected to be born overseas. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, it's mainly about creating fractions with a set of data. And then this part is definitely new. It keeps messaging me. So be familiar with this. We'll do definitely more questions about this as well. The next part of the video will be on exercise 13.4, which is quite very similar